Hey, amazing viewers! Thanks for clicking on Harry Fictional Hub. Today's special feature is what if Harry and Hermione found an ancient soulbond pact that linked them to 50 wives. Your support through likes, shares, and subscriptions helps us reach more story lovers around the world. Thank you for being part of this community. Now, let's escape into this wonderful story. Chapter 1, The Discovery. The restricted section of the Hogwarts library held a particular silence, heavier, deeper than the quiet of the main library floor. Harry Potter felt it press against his eardrums as he followed Hermione between the towering shelves, their wand light casting long shadows that seemed to crawl across ancient spines. "Remind me why we're risking detention again?" Harry whispered, his breath fogging slightly in the cool air. Hermione didn't look back, her attention fixed on scanning the shelf labels. "Because Snape's essay on protective enchantments requires sources that aren't in the standard texts." Her finger traced along a row of books. "And because you waited until the last possible moment to start it." "I've been busy with Quidditch," Harry protested weakly. "You've been busy watching Ron and Lavender suck each other's faces off and feeling sorry for yourself," Hermione corrected, though her tone lacked real bite. The moonlight streaming through the high windows caught the faint smile playing at her lips. Harry didn't argue. Sixth year had proven more challenging than either of them had anticipated, and not just academically. Between Ron's new relationship, Dumbledore's private lessons, and the growing shadow of Voldemort's return, they had precious little time to simply be teenagers. Here, Hermione stopped suddenly, causing Harry to nearly collide with her. "This section should have what we need. Protective magics through the ages." Harry raised his wand higher, illuminating a collection of particularly ancient-looking volumes. "These look older than Dumbledore." "Some of them probably are." Hermione carefully extracted a heavy tome bound in faded blue leather. "Start with this one. I'll check the lower shelf." They worked in companionable silence, the occasional rustle of pages the only sound. Harry found himself more distracted than usual, his thoughts drifting from the task at hand. Outside the castle walls, war was brewing. Inside, life somehow continued, classes, homework, petty rivalries. The disconnect felt increasingly jarring. "Harry?" Hermione's voice cut through his thoughts. "Are you even looking?" "Sorry." He blinked, refocusing on the pages before him. The text swam with archaic language and complex diagrams of wand movements. "Not finding anything useful." Hermione sighed, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "We need something specific on layered protection spells. Snape mentioned the Paracelsus method in class. You know he sets these impossible assignments on purpose, right?" Harry grumbled, returning the book to its shelf with perhaps more force than necessary. As the book slid back into place, something caught his eye, a glint of gold from deeper in the shelf. He frowned, leaning closer. "What is it?" Hermione asked, noticing his sudden interest. "There's something." Harry reached back, his fingers brushing against what felt like metal. With careful maneuvering, he extracted a small, thin volume from where it had been wedged behind the other books. Unlike its neighbors, this book was bound not in leather but in some silvery material that seemed to shimmer even in the dim wand light. Intricate gold filigree traced patterns across its cover, forming symbols that Harry didn't recognize from any of his classes. "That's odd," Hermione said, moving closer to examine the book. "I don't think that was part of the regular collection. Maybe it fell back there ages ago and was forgotten." Harry suggested, turning the slender volume over in his hands. It felt warm to the touch, almost alive. "Maybe." Hermione didn't sound convinced. "What language is that?" "It's not Latin or Greek." The title, etched in flowing script across the top of the cover, contained characters that seemed to shift slightly when Harry tried to focus on them directly. "I can't tell," Harry admitted. "But look at this symbol." In the center of the cover was an intricate design, a circle containing what appeared to be a stylized tree, its branches reaching upward while its roots extended downward, forming a perfect mirror image. Around the tree were smaller symbols that reminded Harry vaguely of runes, though not any he recognized from Hermione's ancient runes textbooks. "That's the world tree," Hermione whispered, her academic curiosity clearly piqued. "It appears in various forms in mythologies around the world, Yggdrasil in Norse legends, the Ashvatha in Hindu texts. But this particular representation..." She reached out, her finger hovering just above the symbol without touching it. "We should probably put it back," Harry said, even as his own curiosity burned. After 5 years at Hogwarts, he'd learned to be wary of mysterious magical objects, particularly those that seemed to have been deliberately hidden. "Just a quick look," Hermione insisted, her scholarly instincts overriding her usual caution. "It might be important." Harry hesitated, then carefully opened the cover. The pages inside were made of some material thinner than parchment but sturdier than paper, with a faint luminescence that made the text readable even without their wand light. The first page contained only a single line of text in the same shifting script as the cover. As Harry stared at it, something strange happened. The characters began to rearrange themselves, transforming before his eyes until they formed words in clear English. "To those of true heart and shared purpose, the covenant reveals itself." "It's translating itself," Hermione breathed, her eyes wide. "That's incredibly advanced magic." Harry turned the page. The next spread contained an intricate illustration, a map unlike any he'd seen before. Rather than countries or continents, it showed a network of glowing lines connecting various points across what appeared to be the entire globe, like a constellation spread across Earth itself. Small annotations in the same shifting script labeled each nexus point. "This is..." Hermione trailed off, leaning closer. As they both bent over the page, Harry felt a sudden warmth where his fingers touched the parchment. The lines on the map began to glow more intensely, and one point in particular, located in what Harry guessed was somewhere in Britain, pulsed with golden light. "Harry," Hermione said, her voice tense. "I think we should." She never finished her sentence. The moment her hand brushed against Harry's on the page, the book flared with blinding light. Harry felt a jolt like static electricity run up his arm, through his chest, and straight to his scar, which burned suddenly with an intensity he hadn't felt since Voldemort's return. Hermione gasped beside him, and he knew she'd felt something similar. The light subsided as quickly as it had appeared, leaving them blinking in the relative darkness of the library. "What was that?" Harry hissed, his heart pounding. Hermione shook her head, looking as stunned as he felt. "I don't know, but, who's there?" The raspy voice of Filch echoed from the library entrance. "Students out of bed." "Damn," Harry whispered, snapping the book shut instinctively. To his surprise, it seemed to shrink in his hands, condensing itself until it was no larger than a deck of cards. Without thinking, he stuffed it into his pocket. "Let's go." They extinguished their wands and moved silently through the stacks, years of rule-breaking having taught them both how to navigate the castle undetected. They barely avoided Filch at the library entrance, ducking behind a suit of armor as the cantankerous caretaker shuffled past, muttering to Mrs. Norris about punishment and manacles. The journey back to Gryffindor Tower was tense but uneventful. Only when they had climbed through the portrait hole into the mercifully empty common room did Harry exhale fully. "That was too close," Hermione said, collapsing into an armchair by the dying fire. Harry nodded, suddenly very aware of the book in his pocket, which seemed to pulse with warmth against his leg. He pulled it out, surprised to find it had returned to its original size. "We should tell Dumbledore about this," Hermione said, eyeing the book warily. "Tomorrow," Harry agreed, but his fingers traced the cover with inexplicable fascination. "But first, let's figure out what it is." Hermione hesitated, then nodded, her own curiosity evidently winning out. "Just be careful. After the diary in second year." "I know." Harry carefully opened the book again. The pages now seemed different, as though the contents had rearranged themselves after their touch. Where the map had been, there was now text, still in English, though the letters retained a strange, fluid quality, as though they might shift back to their original form at any moment. The Covenant of Convergent Paths, Harry read aloud. Established in the time before time by those who walked between worlds, binding together the streams of magic that flow through all living things. That sounds like something from Bin's class, Hermione said, though her voice lacked its usual skepticism. The time before time, that could refer to the prehistorical magical period, before wizard kind began recording their history. Harry continued reading. To those who awaken the Covenant, great responsibility is entrusted. The guardians of the Nexus stand as stewards of the ancient ways, preserving the balance between the worlds and protecting the convergence points from those who would corrupt or destroy them. Guardians of the Nexus? Harry looked up at Hermione, whose brow was furrowed in concentration. What does that mean? I don't know, she admitted, which Harry knew wasn't easy for her to say. But I think the book is saying that we've somehow activated this covenant. That we're these guardians now. Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dying fire. Why us? We just touched a book. It said, those of true heart and shared purpose, Hermione reminded him. Maybe it chose us, somehow. The concept should have seemed absurd, but after everything they'd experienced at Hogwarts, the Philosopher's Stone, the Chamber of Secrets, the prophecy, Harry couldn't dismiss it outright. He turned the page again, revealing a new illustration. This one showed two figures standing back to back, surrounded by concentric circles of light. The figures were indistinct, their features blurred, but as Harry stared, they seemed to sharpen and clarify until he was looking at stylized representations of himself and Hermione, his unruly hair and glasses, her characteristic bushy hair unmistakable. Hermione, he said quietly. Look at this. She leaned over, her hair brushing his shoulder, and inhaled sharply. That's us. The book is responding to us, Harry said. Changing for us. Hermione pulled back slightly, her expression troubled. This is powerful magic, Harry. More powerful than anything we've encountered before. And if it was hidden in the restricted section, then someone might not want it found, Harry finished grimly. Or someone wanted to make sure only the right people found it. The book warmed in his hands again, and the pages turned by themselves, settling on a new section titled, The Awakening. As the Covenant awakens, so too do the powers long dormant within the chosen guardians. That which was separate becomes whole, that which was hidden becomes known. The veil between worlds thins, and the true nature of magic reveals itself to those worthy of its trust. Cryptic, Harry muttered. But specific, Hermione countered. It's talking about some kind of magical awakening, powers that were dormant. Her eyes widened suddenly. Harry, your scar, it reacted when we touched the book together. Harry's hand went reflexively to his forehead. The lightning bolt scar felt normal now, but he remembered the sharp burn when the book had flared with light. Do you think it's connected to Voldemort? He asked, his voice dropping instinctively. Hermione shook her head slowly. I don't know. But this book, it feels ancient, Harry. Older than Voldemort, older than Grindelwald, maybe even older than Hogwarts itself. Before Harry could respond, the book warmed again, this time almost hot enough to make him drop it. The pages turned rapidly, stopping at a blank spread. As they watched, words began to form across the parchment, as though an invisible hand were writing them. The first trial approaches. The balance shifts. Ancient enemies stir. Prepare, guardians, for your awakening has been felt. The ominous words hung in the air between them. Harry felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders, the weight of responsibility, of destiny intruding once again on what should have been a normal school year. What does it mean, the first trial approaches? Harry asked, though he suspected Hermione knew no more than he did. I don't know, she said, confirming his suspicion. But I think we need to learn more about this covenant before whatever it's warning us about happens. Harry nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from their near capture by Filch was wearing off, leaving him drained. We should get some sleep. We can research more tomorrow. You're right. Hermione stood, but hesitated. What about the book? Should we? I'll keep it with me, Harry decided, not entirely sure why he felt so certain. It seems safer than leaving it somewhere. Hermione nodded, though she still looked troubled. Just be careful, Harry. We don't know what it's capable of yet. They said goodnight at the base of the dormitory stairs, each heading to their respective rooms. As Harry changed into his pajamas, he placed the book carefully in his trunk, beneath his invisibility cloak. Only when he was lying in bed, curtains drawn around him, did he allow himself to fully process what had happened. A mysterious book. An ancient covenant. Guardians and trials and awakening powers. It was enough to make his head spin, but beneath the confusion was a strange sense of rightness, as though pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed were finally falling into place. His last thought before drifting off to sleep was that, for once, the mystery centered around him didn't seem to be directly connected to Voldemort, and that alone made it worth exploring. Harry dreamed. He stood atop a hill under a night sky ablaze with more stars than he'd ever seen, even from the astronomy tower. Below him stretched a landscape both familiar and alien, forests and lakes and mountains that resembled those around Hogwarts, yet different in subtle ways, as though viewed through a distorting lens. The convergence approaches, a voice said beside him. Harry turned to find Hermione standing there, but not as he knew her. This Hermione wore robes of midnight blue embroidered with the same golden symbols from the book. Her hair floated around her as though underwater, and her eyes held a knowledge that seemed ancient beyond her years. What convergence? Harry asked, his voice echoing strangely. The paths that were sundered must be rejoined, Dream Hermione said, gesturing toward the sky. The covenant ensures the balance. Harry looked up. The stars were moving, rearranging themselves into patterns that matched the network of lines from the book's map. As he watched, they began to pulse in rhythm, like a heartbeat. I don't understand, Harry said, frustration building. You will. Dream Hermione turned to face him fully. We both will. That's why we were chosen. But chosen for what? Instead of answering, she pointed to something behind him. Harry turned and gasped. Where there had been empty hillside moments before, a massive stone arch now stood, its surface covered in the same shifting symbols as the book. Through the arch, he could see something. Not a landscape or a room, but a swirling vortex of color and light that somehow felt more real, more substantial than the world around him. The first Nexus, Dream Hermione said. One of many. The places where worlds touch. Harry took an involuntary step toward the arch, drawn by an inexplicable yearning. Is this real? As real as magic itself. She was beside him now, taking his hand. We must protect them all, Harry. That's what it means to be guardians. Together, they stepped toward the arch. The vortex beyond it seemed to reach out toward them, tendrils of light and color extending like welcoming hands. Harry felt no fear, only a sense of homecoming, as though he were about to step into a place he'd always been meant to find. Just as they reached the threshold, a shadow fell across the arch. Harry looked up to see a figure silhouetted against the starry sky, tall and imposing, with robes that seemed to drink in the light around them. The ancient enemy awakens, Dream Hermione whispered, her grip on his hand tightening. We must be ready. The shadowy figure raised a hand, and the arch began to crack, fractures spreading across its surface like spiderwebs. The vortex beyond it churned violently, its colors darkening. No! Harry shouted, reaching out his free hand instinctively. To his shock, a surge of power flowed from his fingertips, not the familiar magic he'd wielded with his wand, but something deeper, more primal. Golden light erupted from his palm, striking the arch and halting the spread of cracks. Beside him, Hermione raised her own hand, silver light joining his gold, weaving together in a complex pattern that sealed the fractures in the stone. The shadowy figure recoiled, seeming surprised by their resistance. For a moment it solidified enough for Harry to glimpse a face, human yet not, with eyes that held the cold emptiness of deep space. You cannot stop what has already begun, a voice hissed, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The convergence will be ours. With that, the figure dissolved into smoke, swept away by a sudden wind. The arch stabilized, the vortex beyond it calming to its previous gentle swirl. Harry lowered his hand, staring at it in wonder. The power he'd felt was already fading, but the memory of it lingered, wild and ancient and somehow right. "What was that?" he asked, turning to Dream Hermione. She smiled, a knowing look that reminded him painfully of Dumbledore. "The awakening. It has begun." The dream began to fade, the hillside and arch dissolving into mist. The last thing Harry saw was Hermione's face, her expression both exhilarated and afraid, before darkness claimed him entirely. Harry woke with a start, sunlight streaming through a gap in his bed curtains. For a moment, he lay disoriented, the vivid dream still clinging to him like cobwebs. He could almost feel the strange power that had flowed through him, the connection to something vast and ancient. Rubbing his eyes, he sat up and reached automatically for his glasses. As his hand closed around them on the bedside table, a spark of golden light jumped from his fingers to the metal frames. Harry froze, staring. Had he imagined it? Cautiously, he picked up the glasses and put them on. Everything looked normal, the familiar blur of his dorm room coming into focus, his sleeping roommates, the morning sunlight painting stripes across the floor. Shaking off his unease, Harry dressed quickly and retrieved the book from his trunk. It looked innocuous in the morning light, its silvery cover gleaming softly. He tucked it into his robes and headed down to the common room. Hermione was already there, sitting alone by the window with a stack of books beside her. She looked up as he approached, and Harry immediately knew she'd experienced something similar to his dream. There was a new awareness in her eyes, a subtle tension in the way she held herself. "You dreamed too," he said without preamble, dropping into the chair opposite her. She nodded, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. The common room was mostly empty, with just a few first-years gathering their books for early classes. "It was so vivid," she whispered. "We were standing on a hill, and there was an arch, and a shadow figure trying to break it," Harry finished. "And we used some kind of magic, without wands." Hermione's eyes widened. "You saw the same dream?" "It seems like it." Harry leaned forward, keeping his voice low. "Have you ever heard of shared dreams before?" "It's rare," Hermione said, gesturing to one of the books beside her. "I've been in the library since dawn. There are some documented cases among twins or people with very strong magical connections, but not ordinary friends," Harry completed her thought. "We've never been ordinary, Harry," Hermione said with a small smile. "But this is different. When I woke up this morning, I tried a simple Lumos spell, just to check, and..." She glanced around once more, then held out her palm. Concentrating briefly, she whispered, "Lumos," without drawing her wand. A small globe of light appeared above her hand, floating serenely a few inches above her skin. Unlike the standard wand light they'd been producing for years, this light had a silvery quality to it, with tiny motes that seemed to dance within the sphere. "I've never been able to do wandless magic before," Hermione said, closing her hand to extinguish the light. "Not like that. It felt different. Like I was channeling the magic rather than creating it." Harry nodded, remembering the spark that had jumped from his fingers that morning. "I think the book was telling the truth. Something's awakening in us. But what exactly? And why us?" Hermione's brow furrowed in that familiar way that meant her mind was racing. "I checked every reference I could find on this covenant of convergent paths, but there's nothing. Not in Hogwarts, a history, not in any of the standard magical encyclopedias." "Maybe we need to look somewhere less standard," Harry suggested. "The Room of Requirement, perhaps? Or ask Dumbledore?" Hermione bit her lip. "I'm not sure about involving Dumbledore yet. Not until we understand more." Harry was surprised. Hermione usually advocated taking problems straight to the professors. Why not? I'm not sure, she admitted. Just a feeling. In the dream, it felt like this was ours, somehow. Our responsibility. Harry understood. Despite his complicated relationship with Destiny, he too felt a strange protectiveness toward their discovery, a sense that the book had indeed chosen them specifically. We should at least show Ron, he said after a moment. He'd want to know. Hermione's expression darkened slightly. Would he? He's been rather occupied lately. Harry sighed. The tension between Ron and Hermione had been growing since Ron had begun dating Lavender, and he had no desire to get caught in the middle. It's still Ron, he said gently. Whatever's going on, he's still our best friend. Hermione nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. You're right. We can tell him at breakfast. Before they could continue their conversation, the portrait hole opened and students began streaming in from the Great Hall, signaling the end of the breakfast period. Among them was Ron, his arm draped around Lavender's shoulders, both of them laughing at something Seamus had said. Hermione stiffened beside Harry, gathering her books with perhaps more force than necessary. On second thought, let's wait a bit. I need to return these to the library before class. Harry nodded, understanding her reluctance to have this particular conversation in front of Lavender. After potions, then. Perfect. Hermione stood, balancing her stack of books expertly. And Harry? Be careful today. If what happened to us is really connected to that dream. I know, Harry said grimly. The ancient enemy and all that. I'll keep my eyes open. As Hermione headed for the portrait hole, Harry couldn't help but notice that the other students seemed to part for her, almost unconsciously giving her space. There was something different about her this morning, a subtle aura of power that hadn't been there before. Looking down at his own hands, Harry wondered if others could sense a change in him as well. Ron spotted him and detached himself from Lavender with a quick word, making his way over. Morning. Where were you at breakfast? Overslept, Harry lied smoothly. And then got caught up talking with Hermione about. He hesitated, then went with a safer topic. About Snape's essay. Ron groaned. Don't remind me. I'm nowhere near finished, and it's due tomorrow. Maybe Hermione will let me look at hers. Harry shrugged noncommittally. You can ask her in potions. Speaking of which, we should get going. Ron glanced at his watch. Slughorn will have kittens if his favorite student is late. Harry rolled his eyes at the reference to Slughorn's obvious favoritism, but gathered his bag and followed Ron toward the portrait hole. As they walked, he felt the book in his robes, a comforting weight against his side. Whatever was happening, whatever this awakening meant, at least he wasn't facing it alone. He and Hermione had faced strange magic before, and they'd always emerged stronger. Still, as they descended toward the dungeons, Harry couldn't shake the image of the shadowy figure from his dream, or the ominous words that had appeared in the book, The First Trial Approaches. Potions class was typically uneventful, with Slughorn lavishing his usual attention on Harry due to his newfound talent, which both he and Hermione knew was really the Half-Blood Prince's talent. Today, however, Harry found it difficult to concentrate. The book in his robes seemed to pulse occasionally with warmth, and twice he caught Hermione looking at him with a significant expression, as though she could sense it too. More distracting still were the changes he was beginning to notice in himself. Colors seemed sharper, more vibrant. Sounds reached him with greater clarity. And the magic happening around the room, Slughorn's demonstration, his classmates' brewing efforts, appeared different somehow. If he unfocused his eyes slightly, he could almost see the spells and potions as patterns of light and energy, flowing and interacting in complex ways. Mr. Potter, Slughorn's voice broke through his reverie. Perhaps you could tell us the primary reason one must stir the draft of living death counterclockwise rather than clockwise? Harry blinked, trying to recall anything from either his textbook or the prince's notes. Air. Before he could formulate a response, knowledge suddenly bloomed in his mind, not memorized facts from a textbook, but a deep understanding of the principles involved, as though he'd studied potion-making for decades. Counterclockwise stirring creates a subtle vortex pattern that allows the saprophoros juice to bind with the asphodel essence at a molecular level, he heard himself saying. Clockwise stirring would create too much turbulence, causing the volatile components to separate rather than integrate. The class fell silent. Slughorn stared at him, his walrus mustache twitching in surprise. Even Hermione was gaping slightly. Well, well. Slughorn finally boomed, looking delighted. That's precisely correct, Mr. Potter. And quite advanced reasoning, I must say. 5 points to Gryffindor for such thorough understanding. Harry felt his face grow warm as whispers broke out around the classroom. How had he known that? It certainly wasn't in the Half-Blood Prince's notes, nor was it the kind of technical explanation he'd ever been capable of giving before. He risked a glance at Hermione, who was watching him with a mixture of surprise and understanding. She gave him a small nod, as if to say, "We'll talk about this later." The remainder of the class passed in a blur. Harry found himself completing his potion with unusual ease, his hands seeming to know exactly what to do without consulting either the textbook or the prince's annotations. By the end of the period, his draft of Living Death was perfect, not just good enough, as it usually was thanks to the prince's shortcuts, but truly perfect, with the exact pearly sheen described in the official instructions. Outstanding work today, Harry. Slughorn beamed, holding up a vial of Harry's potion for the class to see. I dare say this is professional quality. Another 5 points to Gryffindor. As they packed up their things, Ron leaned over. Since when did you become a potions genius without the prince's help? I saw you barely looking at the book. Just had a good day, I guess, Harry said evasively. Listen, Ron, Hermione and I need to talk to you about something. Can you meet us by the lake after lunch? Ron's expression clouded slightly. Actually, I promised Lavender I'd help her with her transfiguration homework during the free period. Harry tried to hide his disappointment. Right. No problem. Maybe later, then. Sure, mate. Ron clapped him on the shoulder. Everything okay? Fine, Harry assured him, though he wasn't sure that was true. Just something we found that you might find interesting. Ron nodded, but Harry could see his attention was already elsewhere, his eyes seeking out Lavender across the classroom. With a quick goodbye, he headed over to her, leaving Harry to finish packing his ingredients alone. Hermione appeared at his side, her own bag already neatly organized. That explanation you gave, she said quietly. That wasn't from the prince's book. Harry shook his head. It just came to me. Like I suddenly understood potion making on a completely different level. The same thing happened to me in arithmancy yesterday, Hermione confessed as they left the classroom together. Professor Vector asked about a particularly complex numerical sequence, and I found myself explaining it using principles I've never studied. They walked in thoughtful silence for a moment, both processing the implications. The book mentioned Powers Awakening, Harry finally said. I think this is what it meant. Not just new abilities, but new knowledge. Understanding things we've never learned. But why these specific things? Hermione wondered. And where is this knowledge coming from? Harry had no answer, but the book in his robes warmed again, as though responding to their questions. He placed his hand over it instinctively. We need somewhere private to examine the book again, he said. The room of requirement? Hermione nodded. Perfect. We have an hour before charms. That should give us enough time to, she broke off suddenly, her eyes fixed on something over Harry's shoulder. Her expression hardened in a way he rarely saw outside of confrontations with Death Eaters or particularly severe rule-breakers. Harry turned to see what had caught her attention. Coming toward them along the dungeon corridor was a wizard in the unmistakable robes of a ministry official, deep blue with silver trim, bearing the ministry's emblem. He was tall and thin, with close-cropped silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His eyes, a pale, almost colorless blue, fixed on them with unsettling intensity. "Mr. Potter, Miss Granger," he said, his voice cultured and precise. "How fortunate to find you both together. Might I have a word?" Harry felt an immediate and inexplicable dislike for the man, coupled with a strange sense that he'd seen him before, though he was certain they'd never met. "I'm afraid we're due in our next class, sir," Hermione said politely but firmly. The man smiled, though it didn't reach his cold eyes. "This won't take long. My name is Augustus Rookwood. I'm with the Department of Mysteries." Harry and Hermione exchanged a quick glance. After their disastrous experience at the Department of Mysteries the previous year, neither of them had particularly fond feelings toward its employees. "What can we help you with, Mr. Rookwood?" Harry asked, keeping his tone neutral. Rookwood's gaze swept over both of them, lingering slightly longer than was comfortable. "There was a disturbance detected by certain instruments in our department last night. A magical anomaly centered around Hogwarts. I've been sent to investigate." Harry felt Hermione tense beside him, though her face remained impassive. The book seemed to grow hotter against his side. "What kind of anomaly?" Hermione asked, her voice betraying nothing of her apparent concern. "A surge of very old magic," Rookwood said, watching their reactions carefully. "The kind that hasn't been detected in Britain for centuries. Naturally, when such things occur in proximity to Harry Potter, the Ministry takes notice." Harry forced a smile. "Well, I'm afraid I can't help you. Last night I was studying in the library and then went straight to bed. Nothing unusual happened." It wasn't exactly a lie, Harry reasoned. The library part was true, and discovering an ancient magical covenant probably didn't qualify as unusual by his standards. "Indeed?" Rookwood's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you, Miss Granger?" "Nothing out of the ordinary." "Nothing at all," Hermione said smoothly. "As Harry said, we were studying for our NEWT classes." Rookwood studied them for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "I see. Well, if you do notice anything unusual, changes in your magical abilities, strange dreams, unexpected knowledge, I would appreciate being informed immediately." Harry felt a chill at the man's words, which matched their experiences with unsettling precision. Beside him, Hermione's posture had grown rigid, though her face remained pleasantly neutral. "Of course, Mr. Rookwood," she said. "But we really must get to class now." "Certainly." Rookwood stepped aside, gesturing for them to pass. "I'll be at Hogwarts for several days, conducting my investigation. I'm sure we'll speak again soon." As they walked past him, Harry felt the man's eyes on his back, like physical pressure between his shoulder blades. The book in his robe seemed to pulse in response, warming against his side. Only when they had turned the corner and were well away from the dungeons did Hermione speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "He knows something." Harry nodded grimly. "Those things he mentioned, changes in abilities, strange dreams, unexpected knowledge, that's exactly what's happening to us." "And he's from the Department of Mysteries," Hermione added, her pace quickening slightly. "If anyone would have records of ancient magic or forgotten covenants. But can we trust him?" Harry asked, thinking of the cold, calculating look in Rookwood's pale eyes. "I felt like I'd seen him before." Hermione's expression darkened. "That's because you have. Augustus Rookwood was a Death Eater during the First Wizarding War. He was convicted and sent to Azkaban." Harry stopped short. "What? Then how is he working for the Ministry?" "He claimed he was under the Imperius Curse, like Lucius Malfoy and the others." Hermione's voice dripped with skepticism. "He was released and eventually reinstated to his position. I read about it in the Old Prophet archives when researching for the DA last year. And now he's here, investigating exactly what's happening to us." Harry resumed walking, his mind racing. "That can't be a coincidence." "No," Hermione agreed. I think he might be the ancient enemy from our dream. Or at least connected to it. They reached the 7th floor and paced 3 times in front of the blank wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, concentrating on their need for a safe place to study the book. The familiar door materialized, and they slipped inside quickly, checking to ensure no one had followed them. The room of requirement had configured itself as a cozy study space, with comfortable armchairs arranged around a low table, bookshelves lining the walls, and a cheerful fire burning in a small hearth. Large windows overlooked the Hogwarts grounds, though Harry knew they were actually deep within the castle. "Let's see what the book has to say about Rookwood," Harry said, pulling the silvery volume from his robes and placing it on the table. As soon as he set it down, the book opened by itself, pages turning rapidly until they settled on a new section titled, "The Watchers." "Since the Covenant was first established, there have been those who sought to control or destroy it," Hermione read aloud. "The Watchers, once guardians themselves, corrupted by the desire for power, observe from the shadows, waiting for any sign of the Covenant's awakening. They believe that by controlling the Nexus points, they can channel the convergent energies for their own purposes." "That sounds like Rookwood," Harry said grimly. "A corrupted guardian." Hermione continued reading. "The true guardians must be vigilant, for the Watchers wear many faces and hold positions of influence throughout the worlds. They have patience beyond mortal reckoning, willing to wait centuries for the Covenant to resurface." "Centuries," Harry repeated. "How old is this magic, exactly?" As if in response to his question, the book's pages turned again, revealing a timeline that stretched across both pages. The dates began far earlier than Harry had expected, thousands of years in the past, with the earliest entry marked at approximately 10,000 BCE. "The founding of the Covenant," Hermione breathed, her finger hovering over the first date. "That's during the last ice age, Harry. Before recorded human civilization." Harry stared at the timeline, trying to process the implications. The book claimed to represent a magical tradition far older than anything they'd studied at Hogwarts, older even than the founding of the school itself. "Look at this," Hermione said, pointing to a more recent date, 1945. "The last recorded guardians." Beside the date was a brief note, "The Peveril Covenant severed. The Nexus points sealed. The Guardians fall." Peveril. Harry straightened. "As in the Peveril brothers? From the tale of the 3 brothers? "It could be a coincidence," Hermione said, though she didn't sound convinced. "But given your connection to the Peverils through the invisibility cloak." Harry felt a strange sense of pieces falling into place. His father's cloak, passed down through generations, was one of the legendary Deathly Hallows. If the Peverils had been involved with this covenant as well. So in 1945, something happened to break this covenant, he mused. That's the year Dumbledore defeated Grindelwald. And the same year that Tom Riddle was in his 7th year at Hogwarts, Hermione added. "I wonder if there's a connection." Before they could speculate further, the book warmed beneath their hands, and new text appeared on the page. "The first trial approaches swiftly. The Watcher has found you sooner than expected. You must access your awakening powers and secure the Hogwarts Nexus before it falls into corrupted hands." Harry and Hermione exchanged alarmed looks. "The Hogwarts Nexus?" Harry repeated. "There's one here at the school." "It makes sense," Hermione said thoughtfully. "Hogwarts is built on one of the strongest concentrations of magical energy in Britain. That's why the founders chose this location. But where exactly is this Nexus? And how are we supposed to secure it?" As if responding to his questions, the book's pages turned once more, revealing a detailed map of Hogwarts, not the familiar layout from the Marauder's map, but something older, showing passageways and chambers that Harry had never seen before. In the center of the map, pulsing with the same golden light they'd seen in their dream, was a point deep beneath the castle, lower even than the Chamber of Secrets. "The heart of Hogwarts," Hermione read from the annotation beside the glowing point. "I've never heard of it." "Neither have I," Harry admitted. And I thought I knew all the castle's secrets by now. Hermione traced a finger along one of the passageways leading to the glowing point. This looks like it starts near the kitchens. If we follow this route, we could reach the Nexus, Harry finished. But what then? How do we secure it? The book provided no immediate answer, its pages remaining fixed on the map. Harry sat back in his chair, trying to process everything they'd learned. We need to move quickly, Hermione said, her expression determined. If Rookwood is indeed a watcher, and he sensed the Covenant awakening, he'll be searching for the Nexus too. Harry nodded, a plan already forming. Tonight, after curfew, we'll take the invisibility cloak and the Marauder's map. And the book, Hermione added. I have a feeling we'll need its guidance. As they carefully closed the book and prepared to leave for their next class, Harry felt a strange mixture of trepidation and excitement. Once again, he found himself at the center of a magical mystery that threatened to upend his understanding of the wizarding world. But this time, the mystery felt different, older, deeper, somehow more fundamental to magic itself. And as he slipped the book back into his robes, Harry couldn't shake the feeling that whatever they discovered in the heart of Hogwarts would change them both forever. The rest of the day passed with excruciating slowness. Harry found it nearly impossible to concentrate in his classes, his mind continually drifting to the book, the Covenant, and the mysterious Nexus hidden somewhere beneath Hogwarts. Twice more he experienced flashes of unexpected knowledge, once in charms, where he instinctively understood the complex theory behind a protean charm that even Flitwick seemed impressed by, and again in defense against the dark arts, where he cast a shield charm so powerful it reflected Snape's demonstration spell back with enough force to knock the professor off his feet. The latter incident earned him a week's detention, but Harry barely registered Snape's furious punishment. He was too preoccupied with the strange new awareness growing within him, a sense that magic itself was different than he'd been taught, more alive, more connected to the natural world. He met Hermione briefly between classes, long enough to confirm their plan for that night. She too reported unusual experiences, solving a complex transfiguration problem using a method that made Professor McGonagall raise her eyebrows in surprise, and suddenly understanding the Mermish language when Hagrid played a recording in care of magical creatures. It's accelerating, she whispered as they parted ways for their afternoon classes. The awakening. I can feel it. Harry nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Something was unfurling within them both, a potential that had always been there but somehow dormant until now. Dinner in the Great Hall that evening was a tense affair. Harry picked at his food, hyper-aware of Rookwood sitting at the staff table, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with Professor Snape. Occasionally, the ministry official's pale eyes would scan the hall, and twice Harry caught him looking directly at where he and Hermione sat. He's watching us, Harry murmured, pretending to reach for the pumpkin juice as an excuse to lean closer to Hermione. I know, she replied, her voice equally low. And he's not the only one. Harry followed her subtle glance toward the Slytherin table, where Draco Malfoy was staring at them with undisguised suspicion. Unlike his usual sneering expression, Malfoy looked genuinely unsettled, his pale face drawn and tense. Do you think he knows something? Harry asked. I don't know, Hermione admitted. But he's been acting strangely all year. And if his father was involved with the Department of Mysteries? She didn't need to finish the thought. Lucius Malfoy's connections to both the Death Eaters and the Ministry ran deep. If there was some overlap between Voldemort's goals and this ancient covenant, Draco might well be aware of it. Ron joined them partway through the meal, dropping into the seat across from Harry with a cheerful grin that faded slightly when he noticed their serious expressions. What's up with you two? He asked, helping himself to a generous portion of shepherd's pie. You look like you're planning a break-in at Gringotts or something. Nothing, Harry said, perhaps too quickly. Just, worried about Snape's essay. Ron rolled his eyes. You sound like Hermione. It's just an essay, mate. Hermione bristled visibly but managed to hold her tongue. Harry could sense her growing frustration with Ron's dismissive attitude, and he tried to steer the conversation in a safer direction. "How was your free period with Lavender?" he asked. Ron launched into an account of their study session, which apparently had involved more snogging than actual studying. As he spoke, Harry noticed Hermione's expression growing increasingly stiff, her food forgotten on her plate. "Anyway," Ron concluded, oblivious to Hermione's discomfort, "what was it you wanted to talk to me about earlier? You said you found something interesting." Harry hesitated, glancing at Hermione. He'd been planning to tell Ron about the book and the Covenant, but now he wasn't sure it was the right time. Their discovery felt increasingly personal, a connection between himself and Hermione specifically. "It can wait," Hermione said before Harry could respond. "It's just a research project we're considering." Ron raised an eyebrow. "A research project? During an EWT year? Are you mental?" "It's important," Harry said, feeling a need to defend their decision. "It could help with everything that's going on." "With you-know-who, you mean?" Ron lowered his voice, glancing around. "Is this something Dumbledore asked you to do?" "Not exactly," Harry hedged. "It's complicated." Ron studied them both for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You two are keeping something from me," he finally said, his tone flat. "Ron, it's not like that," Hermione began, but Ron cut her off. "No, I get it. You've got your secret project." "Fine." He stood abruptly. "I promised Lavender I'd meet her in the common room anyway." "Ron," Harry started, but his friend was already walking away, his back rigid with hurt and anger. Hermione sighed, pushing her plate away. "That went well." "We should have told him," Harry said, guilt gnawing at him. "Maybe," Hermione conceded. "But not here, not now. After we find the Nexus, when we understand more about what's happening to us, then we'll explain everything." Harry nodded reluctantly. He hated the distance that seemed to be growing between the three of them, but he understood Hermione's caution. Whatever was happening with the Covenant, it felt too important, too potentially dangerous to share carelessly, even with Ron. They finished their meal in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. As they left the Great Hall, Harry felt Rookwood's eyes following them, that same unsettling pressure between his shoulder blades. The book in his robe seemed to respond, growing warm against his side. "Tonight," Hermione whispered as they climbed the stairs toward Gryffindor Tower. "Midnight. Don't be late." Harry nodded, his determination hardening. Whatever this covenant was, whatever responsibility it had placed upon them, he and Hermione would face it together, as they had faced so many challenges before. The ancient enemy was watching, the first trial approached, and somewhere deep beneath Hogwarts, the Nexus awaited. Chapter 3, The Convergence. Harry awoke the next morning with a strange sense of anticipation. Today would be pivotal. Not only would they be facing Rookwood in defense against the dark arts, but they'd also promised to explain everything to Ron. As he dressed, he could feel the Nexus humming at the edge of his consciousness, a steady reminder of the responsibility he and Hermione had accepted. The dorm was empty except for Ron, who was tying his shoelaces with deliberate focus, clearly avoiding eye contact. The tension between them hung heavy in the morning air. "Morning," Harry ventured. Ron glanced up briefly. "Morning." His tone was neutral, neither friendly nor hostile. "4 o'clock, room of requirement, that's still the plan?" "Yeah," Harry confirmed. "After defense against the dark arts with Rookwood." At the mention of the ministry official, Ron's expression shifted to one of genuine concern. "Everyone's saying he's weird. Dean had him yesterday with the 5th years and said he kept asking questions about you and Hermione." This was news to Harry. "What kind of questions?" "About your magic, your abilities." Ron shrugged, standing up. Dean thought it was just the usual ministry rubbish, keeping tabs on the chosen one and all that, but it seemed odd, him focusing on specific spells you're good at. "It is odd," Harry agreed, mentally adding this to their growing list of concerns about Rookwood. "Thanks for the warning." An awkward silence fell between them. Ron fidgeted with the strap of his bag, clearly wrestling with something. Finally, he spoke. "Look, I know I've been a prat lately," he admitted reluctantly. "It's just, you two have been different. Not just secretive, but actually different. Your magic, the way you talk to each other without speaking, it's like you've left me behind." The raw honesty in Ron's voice made Harry's chest tighten with guilt. "We didn't mean to," he said quietly. "It's all happened so fast. But you're right, things have changed. That's why we want to explain everything today." Ron nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "All right. I'll reserve judgment until then." A ghost of his usual grin appeared. "Even if you have gone mental and joined some secret magical cult or something." Harry snorted. "It's not quite that, but—" He trailed off, realizing that in some ways, the Covenant wasn't entirely unlike a secret magical order. They headed down to the common room together, where Hermione was waiting, her eyes lighting up with hope when she saw them talking civilly. Together, they made their way to breakfast, the conversation carefully confined to safe topics: Quidditch, the upcoming Hogsmeade weekend, Lavender's increasingly elaborate birthday plans for Ron. As they entered the Great Hall, Harry immediately noticed two things: Rookwood was absent from the staff table, and the enchanted ceiling was acting strange again, flickering between the actual cloudy morning sky and brief glimpses of alien constellations and improbable weather phenomena. "What's with the ceiling?" Ron asked, staring upward as a sunset that belonged to no earthly sky momentarily replaced the clouds. "Magical fluctuations," Hermione explained carefully. "Related to what we'll tell you later." Ron accepted this with a nod, though his eyes remained fixed on the ceiling as they took their seats. Around them, other students were commenting on the strange display, but most seemed to treat it as an interesting malfunction rather than a sign of deeper magical disturbance. "Luna's watching us," Harry murmured, noticing the blonde Ravenclaw observing them intently from her table. When she caught his eye, she gave a small, meaningful nod before returning to her copy of the Quibbler. "I wonder if she heard from her father yet," Hermione whispered. Before Harry could respond, the morning post arrived in a flurry of wings. An unfamiliar screech owl landed before him, extending its leg to deliver a small scroll tied with a purple ribbon, another note from Dumbledore. Harry untied it quickly, angling the parchment so Ron couldn't read its contents. "Harry, I have made inquiries regarding our discussion last night. The matter appears more urgent than initially assessed. Please exercise extreme caution in today's defense class. Professor McGonagall will be observing as a precaution, though our visitor is unaware of this arrangement. We shall speak again this evening at the same time. Yours sincerely, Albus Dumbledore." "What is it?" Hermione asked quietly. Harry passed her the note beneath the table. "Dumbledore's concerned about Rookwood," he summarized for Ron's benefit, keeping his explanation deliberately vague. "He's having McGonagall sit in on our defense class today." Ron frowned. "That's unusual. You think Rookwood's up to something?" "Almost certainly," Harry confirmed grimly. They finished breakfast quickly, all three feeling the weight of impending confrontation. As they left the Great Hall, Harry noticed Malfoy watching them again, his pale face drawn and tense. When their eyes met, Malfoy didn't look away, instead giving Harry a barely perceptible nod before turning to follow Crabbe and Goyle. "Did you see that?" Harry asked as they climbed the stairs. "Malfoy?" Hermione confirmed. "Yes. He's been acting strangely all week. Almost like he wants to tell us something." "Maybe he's Rookwood's informant," having second thoughts, Ron suggested, surprising them both with his insight. "It's possible," Harry admitted, recalling Rookwood's mysterious accomplice in the forest. The voice had been young, anxious. It could have been Malfoy, though Harry couldn't be certain. They spent the morning in Transfiguration, where Harry and Hermione were careful to moderate their magical output, performing at their normal pre-Covenant level despite the ease with which they could now manipulate the magic. McGonagall gave them several shrewd looks throughout the class but made no comment on their deliberately restrained casting. Lunch was a tense affair, with Rookwood still conspicuously absent from the staff table. Luna joined them briefly at the Gryffindor table, sliding a folded note to Hermione under the pretext of borrowing a quill. "Dad sent what you needed," she said quietly, her dreamy manner momentarily set aside. "Be careful with the class this afternoon. The Watchers are growing desperate." She drifted away before they could question her further, leaving Hermione to discreetly unfold the note beneath the table. "Luna's father has sent a package to Hogsmeade," she reported in a whisper. "His research on the Covenant. We can pick it up on the weekend." "If we last that long," Harry muttered, glancing at the enchanted ceiling where a blood-red sky now flickered in and out of existence. "The boundaries are weakening faster than before." "All the more reason to be careful in Rookwood's class," Hermione cautioned. "We can't afford to reveal any more of our abilities than necessary." Ron listened to this exchange with growing confusion. "Would one of you please explain what you're talking about? Boundaries? Watchers? Covenant?" "Tonight," Harry promised. "It's all connected." Ron sighed but nodded, accepting the delay with better grace than Harry had expected. They finished lunch quickly and headed to the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, arriving early to secure seats at the back where they could observe everything. Other students filtered in gradually, an air of curiosity surrounding them. Rookwood's substitute teaching had become a topic of considerable interest, with rumors spreading about his unusual focus and questioning style. At precisely the start of the period, the classroom door swung open, and Rookwood entered, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon light, his pale eyes surveying the room with calculated interest. He moved to the front with measured steps, arranging his ministry robes with precise movements before turning to face the class. "Good afternoon," he said, his cultured voice carrying easily through the silent room. "As you know, I am Augustus Rookwood, temporarily replacing Professor Snape while he attends to other matters." His gaze swept the room, lingering momentarily on Harry and Hermione before continuing. "Today, we will be discussing a somewhat unconventional topic. The manipulation of magical boundaries." Harry felt Hermione tense beside him. This was no coincidence. Rookwood was deliberately provoking them, testing their reaction to a subject intimately connected to the Covenant. "Can anyone tell me," Rookwood continued smoothly, "what occurs when the natural boundaries between magical forces are disrupted?" The classroom remained silent, students exchanging confused glances. This was clearly not standard defense curriculum. After a calculated pause, Rookwood's eyes found Hermione. "Miss Granger? Surely you have an insight to offer. Your recent academic performance has been remarkable." The trap was obvious, but Hermione couldn't remain silent without drawing even more attention. "Disruption of magical boundaries can lead to unpredictable magical effects, sir," she answered carefully. "Spillover between spell categories, unintended consequences in charm work." Rookwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A textbook answer, but correct as far as it goes. However, I was thinking of something more fundamental." His gaze shifted to Harry. "Mr. Potter? Any thoughts on boundaries of a more essential nature?" Before Harry could formulate a suitably bland response, the classroom door opened, and Professor McGonagall entered, her expression stern. "Mr. Rookwood," she said crisply. "I trust you don't mind if I observe today's lesson. Dumbledore is most interested in your teaching methods." A flash of annoyance crossed Rookwood's face before his smooth mask returned. "Not at all, Professor McGonagall. I was just discussing magical boundaries with the class." "Indeed?" McGonagall raised an eyebrow, taking a seat near the front. "An unusual topic for Defense Against the Dark Arts. The boundaries between dark and light magic are often misunderstood," Rookwood replied smoothly, pivoting his lesson. "Today we will examine defensive techniques that exist in that gray area." What followed was a masterclass in subtle interrogation disguised as teaching. Rookwood demonstrated several complex shield charms that Harry and Hermione recognized from their studies with the Nexus sphere, defensive magic that drew on principles similar to those used by Guardians, though corrupted slightly from their original purpose. Throughout the lesson, Rookwood called on Harry and Hermione repeatedly, asking increasingly specific questions about magical theory that skirted dangerously close to Covenant concepts. They answered carefully, providing just enough information to appear knowledgeable without revealing their deeper understanding. The tension in the room was palpable, a three-way chess match between Rookwood, McGonagall, and the young Guardians. Ron watched with growing concern, clearly sensing the undercurrents of conflict beneath the academic facade. 40 minutes into the class, Rookwood moved to practical demonstration. "Now, let us see these principles applied," he announced. "Mr. Potter, perhaps you would demonstrate a shield charm for the class. Something beyond the standard Protego, if you're capable." It was a direct challenge, designed to force Harry to either reveal his enhanced abilities or appear incompetent. Harry rose slowly, mind racing through the options the Nexus sphere had shown him. He needed something impressive enough to be credible without revealing Guardian magic. "Of course, sir," he said, stepping to the front of the class. McGonagall watched intently, her eyes narrowed with suspicion, not of Harry, but of Rookwood's intentions. "I'll need something to defend against," Harry pointed out, deliberately sounding nervous. "Indeed you will." Rookwood raised his wand with fluid grace. "Prepare yourself, Mr. Potter. I won't use anything permanently damaging." The threat was subtle but clear. Harry adopted a defensive stance, drawing his wand with practiced ease. He could feel the Nexus energy humming beneath his skin, eager to be channeled, but he carefully restrained it, accessing only what he would have been capable of before becoming a Guardian. "Ready, sir," he confirmed. Rookwood's attack came with startling speed, not a standard spell for classroom demonstration but a vicious cutting curse that sliced through the air with deadly intent. Several students gasped at the inappropriate force, and McGonagall half rose from her seat. Harry reacted instinctively, casting a modified shield charm that he'd learned the previous night from the Nexus sphere, but carefully limiting its power. Protego Orbis. A spherical shield materialized around him, catching Rookwood's curse and absorbing it rather than deflecting it. The shield shimmered with blue-white energy, standard in appearance though its structure was based on Guardian principles. Rookwood's eyes narrowed, his next spell coming without warning, a concussive blast that would have shattered a normal student's shield. Harry's held, though he allowed it to visibly strain under the impact, small cracks appearing in the energy field. "Most impressive, Mr. Potter," Rookwood said softly. "Where did you learn such an advanced variation?" "Extra reading, sir," Harry replied, maintaining the shield with deliberate effort. Hermione recommended some books on advanced defensive theory. Rookwood's smile was predatory. "Did she indeed? How fortunate to have such a studious friend." He raised his wand again. "Let's see how it holds against something more challenging." Before he could cast, McGonagall intervened, rising fully from her seat. "That will be quite sufficient, Mr. Rookwood," she said sharply. "This is a classroom, not a dueling arena." "Merely testing the students' capabilities, Professor," Rookwood replied smoothly. "In these dangerous times, they must be prepared for genuine threats." "By becoming the threat yourself?" McGonagall's voice was ice. "I believe Mr. Potter has demonstrated adequate skill. Perhaps another student would benefit from your instruction." The standoff between them was electric, neither willing to back down. Finally, Rookwood inclined his head slightly. "As you wish, Professor. Mr. Potter, you may return to your seat." Harry cancelled his shield and walked back to his desk, feeling Rookwood's eyes boring into him. He had passed the immediate test but also confirmed Rookwood's suspicions. His magic had changed, even if he hadn't revealed the full extent of his Guardian abilities. For the remainder of the class, Rookwood shifted his focus to other students, though his examples and questions continued to probe the boundaries of conventional magic, seeking any reaction that might reveal knowledge of the Covenant. When the bell finally rang, the tension had wound so tight that several students practically fled the room in relief. "Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, a moment please," Rookwood called as they gathered their things. McGonagall immediately countered, "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Rookwood. Mr. Potter and Miss Granger have an appointment with the headmaster regarding their prefect duties." It was a transparent lie, Harry wasn't even a prefect, but McGonagall delivered it with such authority that Rookwood couldn't challenge it directly. "Another time, then," he said silkily. "I have several advanced defensive techniques I believe they would find particularly relevant to their interests. I'm sure Professor Snape will address any advanced material when he returns," McGonagall replied firmly. "Come along, Potter, Granger, Weasley." She shepherded the three of them from the classroom, maintaining a brisk pace until they had put several corridors between themselves and Rookwood. "Professor Dumbledore asked me to ensure you weren't left alone with that man," she explained in a low voice, once they were safely away. "While I don't know the full situation, I recognize a predator when I see one." She fixed Harry and Hermione with a penetrating look. "Whatever involvement you have with Rookwood's area of interest, proceed with extreme caution. He is not what he appears to be." "We know, Professor," Hermione assured her. "We're being careful." McGonagall nodded tersely. "See that you continue to be. And Mr. Weasley," she added, turning to Ron, who looked thoroughly confused, "keep a close eye on your friends. They may need your support in the days ahead." With that cryptic instruction, she departed, leaving the three of them standing in the empty corridor. "Okay, that was bloody terrifying," Ron said, breaking the silence. "Rookwood was practically attacking you, Harry. What the hell is going on?" "Not here," Harry cautioned, glancing around. "Room of requirement, like we planned." They made their way to the 7th floor, constantly alert for signs of pursuit or surveillance. The castle felt different to Harry now, his enhanced awareness registering subtle magical currents and disturbances that had always been present but previously invisible to him. The boundaries were weakening everywhere, not just in the enchanted ceiling but throughout Hogwarts, reality itself growing thin in places. When they reached the blank wall opposite the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy, Harry paced 3 times, concentrating on their need for absolute privacy and security. The door that materialized was different from the usual room of requirement entrance, heavier, more ornate, with symbols reminiscent of those in the heart carved around its frame. "The castle's responding to our guardian connection," Hermione murmured, recognizing the symbols. "It's giving us enhanced protection." They entered to find a comfortable space similar to the Gryffindor common room but with significant differences. The walls were lined with bookshelves containing texts on magical theory that Harry recognized as relevant to the Covenant. In the center of the room, a miniature version of the Nexus pulsed gently, no larger than a quaffle but perfectly replicating the swirling energy column from the heart. "Blimey," Ron breathed, staring at the miniature Nexus. "What is that thing?" "That," Harry said, closing the door firmly behind them, "is what we need to tell you about. Better sit down, Ron. This is going to take a while." Ron took a seat in one of the armchairs, his expression a mixture of wariness and curiosity. Harry and Hermione exchanged a glance, silently deciding how to begin. Finally, Hermione pulled the silvery book from her bag and placed it on the table between them. "It started with this," she said. "3 nights ago, in the restricted section." Over the next hour, they explained everything, finding the book, discovering the heart of Hogwarts, becoming guardians of the Covenant, their communion with the Nexus, the creation of their anchors, and the threat posed by Rookwood and the Watchers. They took turns filling in details, Harry describing his conversation with Dumbledore while Hermione explained the magical theory behind the Nexus points and the boundaries between worlds. Throughout their explanation, Ron listened in stunned silence, his eyes growing wider with each revelation. When they finally finished, he sat back in his chair, running a hand through his hair in disbelief. "Bloody hell," he said faintly. "You two have been busy. That's your response?" Hermione asked, clearly surprised by his relatively calm reaction. We tell you we become guardians of an ancient magical covenant that connects different worlds, and that's all you have to say. Ron snorted. What did you expect? After 6 years of being friends with Harry Bloody Potter, I've learned to roll with the weird stuff. His expression grew more serious. Besides, it explains a lot, why you've been different lately, the strange magic, those looks you exchange like you're talking without speaking. You've noticed that? Harry asked, surprised. Course I have. Not completely thick, am I? Ron leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. So this Rookwood bloke wants to take over your guardian connection, which would kill you both, and use it to mess with the boundaries between worlds. And he's got spies in Hogwarts helping him. That's the situation, yes, Hermione confirmed. We think the weakening boundaries are accelerating his plans. The vision we saw last night of the Egyptian Nexus being corrupted suggests they're moving forward with whatever ritual they've planned. Ron frowned thoughtfully. So what are you going to do about it? Go to all these Nexus places around the world and fix them? We can't, Harry explained. Not yet. Our connection is to the Hogwarts Nexus specifically. We can sense the others through the network, but we can't directly affect them without being physically present. And we're still learning how to use our guardian abilities effectively, Hermione added. The Nexus sphere Dumbledore gave us contains centuries of knowledge, but absorbing and applying it takes time we may not have, given how quickly the situation is deteriorating. Ron nodded slowly, digesting this. So you need to protect the Hogwarts Nexus from Rookwood while figuring out how to stop whatever ritual the Watchers are planning at the other Nexus points. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. You're going to need help. The simple acceptance and immediate offer of assistance, so quintessentially Ron, made Harry's chest tighten with emotion. This was why they needed him, not just his strategic mind and loyalty, but his ability to cut through complexity to practical action. We do need help, Harry admitted. Especially with identifying Rookwood's spy at Hogwarts. We think it might be Malfoy, but we're not certain. Malfoy, Ron repeated, nodding. Makes sense. His father was tight with the Ministry, and Malfoy's been acting dodgy all year. He frowned suddenly. But what about his thing with Voldemort? We know he's up to something related to the Death Eaters. That's what's confusing, Hermione said. According to Dumbledore, the Watchers and Voldemort have different goals, even if they sometimes overlap. It seems unlikely Malfoy would be serving two masters. Unless one doesn't know about the other, Harry suggested. Voldemort might have assigned Malfoy some task without realizing he's also working for the Watchers. Or the Watchers might be using him without his knowledge, Ron countered. Rookwood was a Death Eater once, right? Maybe he's manipulating Malfoy through that connection. They debated possibilities, Ron immediately falling into the familiar rhythm of their trio, offering perspectives neither Harry nor Hermione had considered. His strategic mind, honed by years of chess, quickly grasped the complex interplay of factions and motivations. After nearly another hour of discussion, they had formulated a plan. Ron would help monitor Malfoy's movements using the Marauder's map, giving Harry and Hermione more freedom to continue their guardian training in the heart. They would also bring Ginny and Luna into their confidence to create a wider network of trusted allies who could watch for suspicious activity throughout the castle. What about Neville? Ron suggested. He's solid in a fight and completely trustworthy. Good idea, Harry agreed. The more eyes we have watching for Watcher activity, the better. But we should be careful about revealing too much, Hermione cautioned. The full details of the Covenant should remain between the three of us, Dumbledore, and Luna, who already knows through her father's research. The others only need to know that Rookwood is dangerous and working against Hogwarts. Agreed, Harry said. Security through compartmentalization. The less anyone knows, the less they can reveal if pressured. As they finalized their plans, Harry felt the miniature Nexus in the center of the room pulse more strongly, colors shifting rapidly within its swirling depths. A moment later, a sharp pain lanced through his scar, bringing a flash of vision, Voldemort, furious, punishing someone who had failed him. Harry? Hermione's concerned voice pulled him back to the present. Another vision? He nodded, pressing his palm against his forehead. Voldemort's angry. Someone's disappointed him. The details were already fading, the connection weaker than before his communion with the Nexus. I couldn't tell who, but they were being punished severely. Maybe Malfoy's dad? Ron suggested. If Rookwood's plans are interfering with Voldemort somehow. It's possible, Harry agreed, though he wasn't convinced. Something about the brief glimpse of Voldemort's victim had seemed familiar, but the impression was too fleeting to identify. The miniature Nexus pulsed again, this time accompanied by a subtle tremor that ran through the room. The books on the shelves rattled, and the floor seemed to shift beneath their feet momentarily. That wasn't my scar, Harry said, alarmed. Something's happening with the boundaries. Hermione hurried to the window the room had provided, gasping at what she saw. Look at the sky. Harry and Ron joined her, staring out at a spectacle that defied explanation. The afternoon sky over Hogwarts had split into patches, some showing normal clouds while others revealed impossible vistas, a starfield of emerald points of light, a horizon with 3 suns setting simultaneously, a churning vortex of colors that belonged in no earthly atmosphere. The convergence is accelerating, Hermione whispered, her voice tight with concern. The boundaries between worlds are breaking down faster than we anticipated. We need to get to the heart, Harry decided immediately. Strengthen the Hogwarts Nexus to stabilize at least this area. What about Rookwood? Ron asked. If the boundaries are failing, he'll make his move soon. That's why you need to find Ginny and Luna, Harry said. Explain enough that they understand the danger. Have them watch for any unusual activity, especially around the kitchens where the entrance to the heart is located. Ron nodded, accepting the mission without hesitation. What about Dumbledore? Shouldn't he be informed? He already knows something's wrong, Hermione pointed out. The magical disturbances are impossible to miss. We're supposed to meet with him tonight anyway. If we can stabilize the Hogwarts Nexus first, we'll have more options, Harry reasoned. Come on, Hermione. Ron, be careful. If Rookwood suspects you're helping us. I know how to be subtle when I need to, Ron assured him with a wry smile. Survived this long being your friend, haven't I? The 3 of them left the room of requirement together, parting ways in the corridor with newfound purpose. The weight of secrets no longer stood between them, replaced by the shared burden of responsibility. As Ron headed off to find Ginny and Luna, Harry felt a surge of gratitude for his friend's unwavering loyalty. He took it better than I expected, Hermione commented as they made their way toward the kitchens and the entrance to the heart. He always does, when it really matters, Harry replied. That's Ron, complains about the small stuff but steps up for the big challenges without hesitation. They moved cautiously, checking the Marauder's map frequently for any sign of Rookwood or potential watchers. The castle was in a state of growing confusion, students and teachers alike noticing the strange phenomena manifesting throughout Hogwarts, portraits reporting their backgrounds changing randomly, ghosts appearing more solid than usual, staircases connecting to corridors that hadn't existed moments before. The castle structure itself is being affected, Hermione observed as they passed a window that momentarily showed a view of mountains that couldn't possibly be seen from that side of Hogwarts. The physical boundaries are becoming as unstable as the magical ones. They reached the kitchen corridor without incident, quickly locating the spiral-marked stone. As they pressed their palms against it simultaneously, Harry felt a resistance that hadn't been present before. The stone was sluggish to liquefy, as though the magic was struggling against interference. Something's wrong, he murmured, pushing more of his guardian energy into the connection. The stone finally yielded, but the liquid sensation felt thicker, more viscous as they stepped through. The passageway beyond was noticeably different. Where before the crystal veins in the walls had pulsed with gentle light, now they flickered erratically, some sections darkening while others flared with uncomfortable brightness. The air itself felt charged with conflicting energies, making the hair on their arms stand on end. The corruption from the other Nexus points is spreading through the network, Hermione said grimly. Affecting even the Hogwarts Nexus indirectly. They hurried down the spiral passage, both sensing the urgency of reaching the heart before the damage progressed further. When they arrived at the arch leading to the inner chamber, they found it partially translucent, its solid stone appearance intermittently fading to reveal glimpses of the heart beyond. The inscription around the arch was changing rapidly, shifting between languages and symbols so quickly it was impossible to read. Together, they pressed their hands against it, channeling their guardian energy to stabilize the entrance. Slowly, the arch solidified into its proper form, the inscription settling into the familiar welcome message. The Guardian's bond still holds influence, Hermione noted with relief. Our connection to the Nexus remains strong, even as the wider network deteriorates. They stepped through into the heart and immediately understood the full scope of the crisis. The Hogwarts Nexus, previously a serene column of swirling energy, was now pulsing erratically, colors darkening and lightening in chaotic patterns. Around it, the circle of anchors vibrated on their pedestals, the connections between them flickering and straining. Their own anchors, the stag and otter figurines, were holding steady, their gold and silver light providing points of stability in the growing chaos. Harry and Hermione moved quickly toward them, each drawn to their respective creation. We need to reinforce the Nexus, Harry said, reaching for his stag anchor. Channel stabilizing energy through our bond. Hermione nodded, placing her hands on either side of her otter figurine without touching it directly. Follow my lead. I saw a technique in the Nexus sphere specifically for this situation. Harry mirrored her position with his stag, focusing on their connection. Hermione began a complex pattern of magical channeling, drawing energy from her core and feeding it through the silver light of her anchor. Harry caught on quickly, his gold energy joining hers in counterpoint, creating a harmonic resonance that extended toward the disturbed Nexus. As their combined energy reached the central column, the chaotic fluctuations began to slow, colors gradually shifting back toward their normal spectrum. The strain was immense. Harry could feel the corruption pushing back, dark tendrils of foreign magic attempting to maintain their hold on the Hogwarts Nexus. It's resisting, he gritted out, sweat beading on his forehead as he poured more power into the connection. Keep going, Hermione encouraged, her own face tight with concentration. We're making progress. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they fought to purify and stabilize the Nexus. Gradually, their efforts began to show results. The erratic pulsing smoothed into a more regular rhythm, and the dark patches within the energy column receded, pushed back by their combined guardian power. Just as they seemed to be gaining the upper hand, a violent tremor shook the heart, nearly knocking them off their feet. The connection to their anchors wavered but held as they regained their balance. What was that? Harry gasped. Before Hermione could respond, the Nexus flared with intense light, an image forming within its depths, not a distant Nexus point this time, but something much closer. They could see the Hogwarts grounds from above, where a ritual circle had been established near the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Within it stood several robed figures, led by a silver-haired man they immediately recognized as Rookwood. He's making his move, Hermione realized with horror. Using the boundary weaknesses to force access to the heart from outside. The image shifted, showing the ritual in greater detail. Rookwood stood at the center of the circle, arms raised as he chanted in a language neither of them recognized. Around him, 5 other figures maintained positions at precise intervals, their wands pointed inward, channeling magic into symbols carved into the ground. With a shock, Harry recognized one of the figures. The white blonde hair visible beneath a partially lowered hood belonged unmistakably to Draco Malfoy. Malfoy is working with him, he said grimly. We were right. Not willingly, I think, Hermione countered, studying Malfoy's rigid posture and the way Rookwood occasionally glanced at him with what appeared to be threatening intensity. He looks coerced. The ritual was clearly building towards some climax, the magic within the circle intensifying with each passing moment. As they watched, a dark, vertical split began to form in the air above the center of the circle, a tear in reality itself, allowing Rookwood direct access to the magical currents that connected to the heart. He's creating an artificial entrance, Hermione realized. Bypassing the normal passageway completely. We need to stop him, Harry said urgently, but we can't leave the Nexus while it's still unstable. Hermione bit her lip, thinking rapidly. The Nexus sphere, she said suddenly. We can use it to temporarily stabilize the Hogwarts Nexus while we deal with Rookwood. Harry nodded, quickly retrieving the crystal sphere from his pocket. Following Hermione's instructions, they placed it directly beneath the central column, where it immediately began to resonate with the larger energy structure. It's working as a temporary anchor, Hermione explained as they carefully withdrew their hands. Maintaining the stability we've established, at least for a short time. How long will it hold? Harry asked, already moving toward the exit. An hour, maybe less, Hermione estimated, hurrying alongside him. We need to disrupt Rookwood's ritual before it's complete. They raced back through the passageway, the crystal veins pulsing more steadily now that the Nexus had been partially stabilized. When they reached the entrance, Harry pulled out the Marauder's map, quickly locating Ron's dot in the Great Hall with Ginny and Luna. He's gathered our allies, Harry noted with approval. But we won't have time to meet them first. We need to head straight for the forest. As they emerged from the liquid stone entrance, Harry tapped the map with his wand. I need to send Ron a message. Using a spell they'd learned from the Nexus sphere, Harry traced a pattern over Ron's dot on the map. Golden light sank into the parchment, and they watched as Ron's dot suddenly moved away from the others, heading for the castle doors. Message received, Hermione confirmed. He'll bring backup. They moved swiftly through the castle, no longer concerned with stealth. The magical disturbances had escalated during their time in the heart, windows showing impossible landscapes, suits of armor animating without cause, the very stones of the walls occasionally shimmering with transparency to reveal other places, other times. The ritual is accelerating the convergence, Hermione explained as they ran. Rookwood isn't just trying to access the heart, he's deliberately weakening the boundaries to facilitate whatever larger plan the Watchers have. They burst out of the castle into twilight that couldn't possibly be natural, the sky a patchwork of different times of day, some sections showing night while others displayed noon brightness. In the direction of the forbidden forest, ominous clouds had gathered, swirling around a central point where flashes of unnatural light punctuated the gloom. There, Harry pointed, spotting figures moving at the forest edge. As they sprinted across the grounds, they saw Ron emerging from the castle behind them, accompanied by not just Ginny and Luna but also Neville and, surprisingly, Dean Thomas. All had their wands drawn, following Harry and Hermione's lead toward the disturbance. Drawing closer to the ritual site, they could feel the wrongness of the magic, corrupt and grasping, tearing at the fabric of reality rather than working within its natural patterns. The tear in the air had widened substantially, now a gaping void that pulsed with sickly purple-black energy. Get down! Harry called, pulling Hermione behind a large rock as they reached the edge of the clearing. Their friends joined them moments later, crouching low to avoid detection. What the bloody hell is that? Ron whispered, staring at the ritual circle and the tear hovering above it. Rookwood's trying to force his way into the heart, Harry explained quickly. That tear leads directly to the Hogwarts Nexus, bypassing the normal protections. And that's bad because... Dean asked, clearly having received only the most basic explanation from Ron. Because if he gains control of the Nexus, he can reshape reality itself, Hermione said grimly. And the process will kill Harry and me. That simple explanation was enough. Dean's expression hardened immediately. Right. How do we stop him? Harry quickly assessed the situation. Rookwood and his 5 accomplices were arranged in a precise pattern, maintaining the tear through continuous channeling. Malfoy was visibly struggling, his face drawn with strain and what might have been reluctance. We need to disrupt the ritual circle, Harry decided. Break their concentration and the pattern of their magic. Without getting caught in whatever that void thing is, Ron added practically. Exactly. Hermione and I will focus on Rookwood directly, our guardian magic should be effective against him. Ron, you and Ginny take the two on the left. Neville and Dean, the one on the right. Luna, can you handle Malfoy? I think he might actually help if given the chance. Luna nodded serenely. He's afraid, not committed. I can reach him. Everyone clear on their targets? Harry confirmed. Receiving nods all around, he continued, on my signal, hit them with everything you've got, stunning spells, disarming charms, anything to break their concentration. Don't get too close to the tear, we don't know what would happen if you touched it. They spread out, taking positions around the clearing to approach from multiple angles. Harry and Hermione moved to the position directly opposite Rookwood, where they could channel their guardian magic most effectively. Ready? Harry whispered, feeling the Nexus energy gathering within him, responding to the threat against its heart. Hermione nodded, her own silver light beginning to shimmer around her hands. Ready. Harry raised his wand, sending red sparks into the air as the signal. Immediately, all 7 of them burst from cover, spells flying toward the ritual circle. Stupefy. Ron and Ginny shouted in unison, their spells striking one of the robed figures squarely in the chest, sending him crumpling to the ground. Neville and Dean targeted another, their combined disarming and impediment jinxes throwing the figure off balance and breaking his magical connection to the ritual. Luna moved with surprising swiftness toward Malfoy, not attacking but calling his name. Draco. You don't have to do this. Malfoy's head jerked toward her, his face a mask of conflict. For a crucial moment, his concentration broke, his contribution to the ritual faltering. Harry and Hermione, meanwhile, faced Rookwood directly, channeling their guardian magic through conventional spells to disguise its true nature. Their combined attack, a shield-breaking hex from Harry and a specialized binding charm from Hermione, slammed into the protective barrier Rookwood had erected around himself. The Ministry official staggered back, momentarily shocked by the power behind their assault. His pale eyes widened with understanding as he recognized the distinctive energy signature. The Guardians, he snarled, his cultured facade cracking to reveal the zealot beneath. You're too late. The convergence has begun. He abandoned the pretense of conventional magic, drawing on corrupted Watcher techniques that Harry and Hermione recognized from their studies with the Nexus sphere. Dark energy coalesced around his hands as he directed a concentrated blast toward them. Harry instinctively raised a guardian shield, gold light flaring from his palms to create a barrier that absorbed Rookwood's attack. Beside him, Hermione countered with a silver-streaked binding spell that sought to entangle Rookwood's corrupted magic and neutralize it. Around them, chaos had erupted. With 3 of the 6 ritual participants disabled, the tear in reality was fluctuating wildly, expanding and contracting in violent pulses. The remaining robed figures, now revealed as adult wizards Harry didn't recognize, fought desperately to maintain control, but the ritual was destabilizing rapidly. Malfoy had fallen to his knees, Luna beside him, apparently having convinced him to withdraw from the ritual entirely. His face was ashen, eyes wide with horror as he watched the consequences of what he participated in. You've doomed us all. Rookwood shouted, abandoning the ritual to focus his attack on Harry and Hermione. Without controlled convergence, the boundaries will collapse chaotically. Better that than your version of control, Harry retorted, advancing steadily against Rookwood's onslaught. The guardian magic flowed through him more freely now, responding to the direct threat against the Covenant. Hermione moved in perfect synchronization with him, their magics intertwining in the patterns they'd practiced. Gold and silver light spiraled around them, forming shields and weapons simultaneously as they pressed Rookwood back toward the destabilizing tier. You don't understand what you're protecting. Rookwood spat, his silver hair wild around his face, his ministry robes torn and singed from magical backlash. The Covenant doesn't preserve balance, it prevents ascension. We could reshape reality itself, become as gods. That's what this is about. Harry asked incredulously, deflecting a particularly vicious curse. You want to become gods? The Watchers have waited centuries for this convergence, Rookwood snarled. The alignment of Nexus points that allows complete restructuring of the boundaries. Your parents interfered last time, Potter, and paid for it with their lives. Harry faltered momentarily at the mention of his parents, giving Rookwood an opening to strike. A lash of dark energy caught Harry across the chest, sending him stumbling backward. Harry! Hermione cried, immediately covering his position with a silver shield while he recovered. My parents, Harry gasped, regaining his footing. What do you mean they interfered? Rookwood's laugh was cold and brittle. They discovered our plans, just as you have. James and Lily Potter, chosen as guardians but never fully bonded to the Nexus. They learned too much, warned Dumbledore, so I informed the Dark Lord of the prophecy, knowing he would eliminate them. The revelation hit Harry like a physical blow. You're the reason Voldemort targeted them. You betrayed the prophecy. A necessary sacrifice, Rookwood said dismissively. The Dark Lord was a useful tool, nothing more. He eliminated the interfering guardians while leaving the Nexus accessible for our purposes. Fury unlike anything Harry had ever known surged through him. This man, this Watcher, had deliberately engineered his parents' murder, manipulating even Voldemort to serve the Watcher's agenda. Golden light exploded around him, his guardian magic responding to his rage and grief. Harry, careful. Hermione warned. Don't let him provoke you into losing control. But Harry was beyond caution. With a wordless cry, he unleashed a wave of pure guardian energy directly at Rookwood. The gold light streaked across the clearing, too fast to dodge, too powerful to block. At the last possible instant, Rookwood threw himself sideways, directly into the fluctuating tear in reality. The guardian magic caught him partially, searing through his protective spells, but his momentum carried him into the void. No! Hermione shouted, realizing what was happening. Rookwood's scream cut off abruptly as the tear enveloped him. For a moment, his form was visible within the void, twisted and distorted as though viewed through rippling water. Then the tear pulsed violently, and he vanished completely. The magical backlash was immediate and devastating. With Rookwood's controlling influence gone, the tear began to collapse in on itself, releasing waves of uncontrolled energy that lashed out in all directions. The remaining ritual participants fled in terror, abandoning their positions. Everyone get back! Harry shouted to their friends, creating a golden shield to protect them from the initial energy wave. The tear is collapsing. Hermione cried, analyzing the magical patterns with her enhanced guardian perception. But it's pulling energy from the Nexus as it does, it could damage the heart permanently. We need to close it properly, Harry realized. Guide its collapse. Yes, but how? We'd need to be on both sides simultaneously too. Hermione broke off, her eyes widening with sudden understanding. Our anchors. They're still in the heart, connected to us. Harry grasped her idea immediately. We can channel through them, work from both sides at once. They moved closer to the tear, positioning themselves directly before it while maintaining protective shields around their friends. The void pulsed and writhed, reality itself warping around its edges as it began a catastrophic collapse. Ready? Harry asked, extending his hand to Hermione. She took it without hesitation, their fingers intertwining. Together. They closed their eyes, focusing on their connection to the anchors in the heart. The distance meant nothing to guardian magic, the bond transcended physical space, linking them directly to the stag and otter figurines pulsing with light beside the Hogwarts Nexus. Through this connection, they could perceive both sides simultaneously, the tear in the Forbidden Forest and its corresponding disturbance within the heart. Working in perfect harmony, they began to channel stabilizing energy through the disruption, guiding its collapse rather than trying to prevent it. Gold and silver light spiraled around the tear, weaving through its chaotic energy patterns, imposing order on entropy. Slowly, the violent fluctuations calmed, the tears shrinking more steadily as they maintained control of its dissolution. The strain was enormous, their magic stretched between two locations, fighting against the natural instability of a breached boundary. Sweat poured down their faces as they poured more power into the effort, drawing deeply on their connection to the Nexus. Almost there, Hermione gasped, her voice tight with exertion. The tear had reduced to half its original size, its energy growing more contained under their guidance. As it continued to shrink, Harry felt a sudden resistance, something caught within the collapsing void, fighting against its closure. "Something's wrong," he gritted out. "Something's still in there." Before they could adjust their approach, a figure came hurtling out of the tear, Rookwood, but changed almost beyond recognition. His skin glowed with unnatural light, his eyes pools of swirling darkness like miniature voids. His form seemed to flicker between solidity and transparency as though he existed partially in multiple realities simultaneously. "You cannot stop the convergence." His voice echoed oddly, layered with undertones that didn't sound human. "The boundaries will fall." He raised his hands, now emanating corrupted energy that was neither light nor darkness but an absence of reality itself. The power he commanded had grown exponentially during his brief time within the void between worlds. "He's absorbed energy directly from the space between boundaries," Hermione realized with horror. "He's become a walking breach." Rookwood's transformed state presented a new and terrible threat, no longer just a watcher seeking to control the Covenant, but a physical manifestation of the very instability they were fighting against. Every moment he existed in this form, the boundaries between worlds grew weaker. "We need to seal him back beyond the boundary," Harry decided, adjusting his grip on Hermione's hand to channel their magic in a new pattern. "If we do, we'll be condemning him to exist between worlds forever," Hermione pointed out, though her expression showed she understood the necessity. "He made his choice when he jumped into the tear," Harry said grimly. "Now he's threatening all reality." Together, they redirected their guardian magic, creating a localized boundary effect around Rookwood's distorted form. Gold and silver energy encircled him, beginning to push him back toward the diminishing tear. "No!" Rookwood howled, fighting against their magic with his newfound power. The very air around him distorted, reality bending unnaturally as he drew on the energy of the breach. The struggle was titanic, their guardian magic against his boundary-warping power. For several agonizing moments, they reached stalemate, neither side able to overcome the other's resistance. Then, unexpectedly, help arrived from an unexpected quarter. Draco Malfoy staggered to his feet, wand extended toward Rookwood. His face was set in determined lines, all traces of his usual sneering arrogance gone. "You used me," he said, his voice shaking but resolute. "You promised to protect my mother from the Dark Lord if I helped you. But you never intended to keep that promise, did you?" Without waiting for a response, Malfoy cast a spell Harry didn't recognize, something clearly taught to him by the Watchers themselves. It struck Rookwood from behind, momentarily disrupting his concentration and weakening his resistance to Harry and Hermione's boundary effect. That moment was all they needed. With a final surge of guardian power, they pushed Rookwood back into the collapsing tier. His scream of rage and despair cut off abruptly as the void sealed around him, shrinking rapidly to a pinpoint before vanishing entirely with a sound like reality itself sighing in relief. The sudden absence of the tear left a profound silence in the clearing. The unnatural clouds above began to dissipate, the sky gradually resolving into a single twilight state rather than the patchwork of times it had been before. The overwhelming sense of wrongness faded, boundaries strengthening as the immediate threat receded. Harry and Hermione released their magical channeling, both swaying with exhaustion. Ron rushed forward to support Harry while Luna helped steady Hermione. "Did it work?" Ginny asked, looking around at the now ordinary forest clearing. "Is it over?" "The immediate danger is past," Hermione confirmed, her voice hoarse with fatigue. "We've sealed the breach and contained Rookwood." "Where exactly is he now?" Neville asked, eyeing the spot where the tear had been. Between, Luna answered before Harry or Hermione could explain. In the space that exists between realities. Not in any world, but caught between all of them. A fitting punishment, Harry said grimly, thinking of Rookwood's revelation about his parents. He wanted to transcend boundaries, now he exists solely within them, unable to fully enter any reality. What about the other Watchers? Dean asked practically. The ones who escaped. They'll regroup, Hermione acknowledged. The Watchers have existed for centuries, losing Rookwood won't end their plans entirely. But without him, they've lost their most knowledgeable leader and their direct connection to the Hogwarts Nexus. And the Egyptian Nexus? Harry asked, remembering the vision of corruption they'd witnessed. Still compromised, Hermione confirmed. Along with who knows how many others. We've won a battle, but the larger conflict continues. Malfoy stood awkwardly at the edge of the group, looking pale and uncertain. When he noticed Harry watching him, he straightened slightly, some of his usual dignity reasserting itself. Potter, he acknowledged stiffly. I didn't know what Rookwood was really planning. He said it was about accessing ancient magic the Ministry had suppressed, magic that could protect my family from. He trailed off, unwilling to directly reference Voldemort. He manipulated you, Harry said, neither accusatory nor forgiving. Just as he manipulated others. Including Voldemort himself. Malfoy's eyes widened slightly at this revelation, but he merely nodded. I should go. The dark, he will know something has happened. If I'm missing too long. Harry understood. Whatever task Voldemort had assigned Malfoy remained in effect, regardless of his brief involvement with the Watchers. This doesn't change anything between us, Malfoy. But, thanks for the help at the end. A complexity of emotions crossed Malfoy's pointed face, relief, regret, resignation. Without another word, he turned and walked away toward the castle, his shoulders set in a way that suggested he was returning to a burden he couldn't escape. Should we let him go? Ron asked dubiously. After what he helped Rookwood do. He was coerced, Luna said softly. Threatened with his mother's safety. And he made the right choice in the end. Besides, Harry added, we have more urgent matters to attend to. We need to check on the heart, make sure the Nexus has stabilized. They made their way back toward the castle as a group, Harry and Hermione explaining more details of the situation as they walked. The grounds of Hogwarts were returning to normal, though occasional flickers of boundary weakness remained visible, a momentary transparency in a wall, a brief shift in the appearance of the lake. The convergence hasn't been stopped completely, Hermione explained. Just slowed. The other corrupted Nexus points are still affecting the network as a whole. As they approached the castle, they saw a familiar figure waiting for them, Dumbledore, standing serenely at the entrance as though their return was precisely on schedule. I see you have been busy, he greeted them, his blue eyes twinkling though his expression remained serious. The magical disturbances are subsiding, which suggests a successful intervention on your part. Rookwood tried to force his way into the heart through an artificial breach, Harry explained quickly. We managed to seal it and contain him. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly. Contain him? In what manner? Hermione explained what had happened to Rookwood, his transformation after entering the tear, and their final solution to the crisis. Dumbledore listened intently, his expression growing graver as he absorbed the implications. A concerning development, he said when they finished. Augustus Rookwood existing in the space between boundaries could have unforeseen consequences. But you made the only choice available in the circumstances. Sir, Rookwood said something about my parents, Harry said, the revelation still raw. He claimed he was the one who told Voldemort about the prophecy, deliberately setting him against my parents because they'd discovered the Watcher's plans. Dumbledore sighed heavily, sudden age settling on his features. I had suspected as much, though I could never confirm it. Rookwood was ideally positioned as an unspeakable to hear the prophecy and ensure it reached Voldemort's ears. That he did so as part of the Watcher's agenda rather than out of loyalty to Voldemort, it adds another layer to an already tragic situation. He said my parents interfered with something called the Convergence last time, Harry pressed. What did he mean? The magical alignment of Nexus points occurs approximately every 30 years, Dumbledore explained. During such convergences, the boundaries between worlds naturally thin, allowing for greater manipulation by those who understand the principles involved. Your parents discovered evidence of the Watcher's plans for the 1981 convergence and brought it to my attention. So Voldemort's attack on my parents wasn't just about the prophecy, Harry said slowly. It was also to eliminate guardians who might interfere with the Watcher's plans. Two purposes served by one tragic act, Dumbledore confirmed sadly. Tom Riddle believed he was acting solely on the prophecy's threat, unaware he was simultaneously advancing the Watcher's agenda. And now we're facing another convergence, Hermione concluded. The 30-year cycle would put it in 2011, but the corruption of multiple Nexus points seems to have accelerated the process. Indeed, Dumbledore agreed. The natural alignment is being artificially hastened through the Watcher's interference with Nexus points worldwide. What should have occurred years from now has been brought to our doorstep prematurely. So what happens now? Ron asked, speaking for the group. How do we stop a worldwide magical crisis when we can barely leave school grounds? Dumbledore's eyes twinkled briefly. An excellent question, Mr. Weasley, and one that will require careful consideration. For tonight, however, I suggest you all return to your dormitories and rest. You have achieved a significant victory, even if the larger conflict continues. But the heart, Harry began. Will still be there tomorrow, Dumbledore finished gently. And you will be better equipped to address its needs after proper rest. Guardian magic requires balance, Harry, between action and recovery. Recognizing the wisdom in Dumbledore's advice, they agreed to postpone further exploration of the heart until morning. The headmaster escorted them back to Gryffindor Tower, with Luna peeling off toward Ravenclaw along the way, ensuring they encountered no trouble from patrols despite being well after curfew. As they climbed through the portrait hole, Harry felt the day's exertions finally catching up with him. The adrenaline of confrontation was fading, leaving bone-deep weariness in its wake. Still, his mind raced with everything they'd learned and everything that remained to be done. The common room was empty except for Ginny, who had gone ahead while they spoke with Dumbledore. She sat in an armchair by the fire, waiting for their return. Everything all right? She asked as they entered. As all right as it can be, Harry replied tiredly. Dumbledore knows the situation. We've bought some time, at least. Ginny nodded, her expression thoughtful. This guardian thing, it's permanent, isn't it? Not just until this crisis is over. Harry and Hermione exchanged glances, both understanding the weight of her question. Yes, Hermione answered simply. The bond to the Covenant is lifelong. I thought so, Ginny said, rising from her chair. You both seem different. Not in a bad way, just more. Like you've grown into something larger than before. Her perception was startlingly accurate. Harry did feel different, not just magically enhanced but fundamentally transformed by his connection to something ancient and vast. Looking at Hermione, he could see that same awareness reflected in her eyes, the knowledge that they had become part of a tradition stretching back millennia, guardians of the very fabric of reality itself. Get some rest, Ginny advised, heading for the girls' staircase. Whatever comes next, you'll handle it better after sleep. She disappeared up the stairs, leaving the trio alone in the common room. For a moment, none of them spoke, each processing the extraordinary events of the day in their own way. Mental, all of this, Ron finally said, breaking the silence. Ancient covenants, Nexus points, boundaries between worlds, makes fighting Death Eaters seem almost straightforward in comparison. Harry laughed despite his exhaustion. You're not wrong. And we still have Voldemort to deal with on top of everything else. One megalomaniac at a time, please, Hermione groaned, sinking into an armchair. I can only handle so many world-ending threats in a single term. They shared a tired laugh, the familiar humor helping to ground them after the otherworldly experiences of the day. For all that had changed, their friendship remained a constant, expanded now to include new dimensions of trust and shared purpose, but fundamentally unaltered in its essence. We should follow Ginny's advice, Harry said eventually. Tomorrow we'll check on the heart, see how the Nexus is recovering, and start planning our next steps. Ron nodded, suppressing a yawn. Wake me if reality starts collapsing again, otherwise I plan to sleep until breakfast. He headed up to the boys' dormitory, leaving Harry and Hermione alone by the dying fire. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence, their magical connection humming softly between them, requiring no words. It's strange, Hermione finally said, her voice soft in the quiet room. A week ago, I was worried about NEWT preparations and prefect duties. Now we're responsible for maintaining the boundaries between worlds. Life with Harry Potter, Harry quipped with a self-deprecating smile. Never a dull moment. I wouldn't have it any other way, Hermione said sincerely, reaching across to squeeze his hand briefly. We'll figure this out, Harry. We always do. Together, he agreed, drawing strength from her unwavering confidence. They parted ways at the staircases, each heading to their respective dormitories. As Harry climbed the spiral steps to the sixth-year boys' room, he felt the Hogwarts Nexus pulsing gently at the edge of his awareness, stable for now, recovering from Rookwood's assault, but still connected to a network under threat. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, stabilizing the Hogwarts Nexus more permanently, researching ways to cleanse the corrupted Nexus points worldwide, preparing for the accelerating convergence. They would need to balance these guardian responsibilities with their existing obligations, classes, Quidditch, and the ever-present threat of Voldemort. But as Harry settled into his four-poster bed, drawing the curtains against the moonlight, he found himself strangely at peace with the enormity of the task ahead. The guardian bond had changed him, yes, but it had also connected him to something larger than himself, larger even than the Wizarding War, a responsibility that transcended individual conflicts to protect the very nature of reality itself. And he wasn't facing it alone. Hermione shared the guardian bond directly, her silver light complementing his gold in perfect harmony. Ron had proven once again that his loyalty and strategic mind were invaluable assets in any crisis. Ginny, Luna, Neville, and now even Dean had demonstrated their willingness to stand against threats they barely understood, simply because they trusted Harry and Hermione's judgment. As sleep finally claimed him, Harry's last conscious thought was of his parents, James and Lily, chosen as guardians before him, fighting against the same enemy even without fully bonding to the Nexus. Perhaps there was a pattern to it all, a continuity of purpose that transcended generations. Perhaps, in becoming a guardian of the Covenant, he was fulfilling not just an ancient magical obligation but a legacy his parents had begun. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new discoveries. The paths between worlds were opening, and Harry Potter, guardian of the Covenant, would walk them with courage, integrity, and the steadfast support of those he loved most. Morning brought pale sunlight streaming through the dormitory windows. Harry woke feeling surprisingly refreshed, the guardian magic having accelerated his recovery during sleep. The connection to the Nexus felt stronger, more stable than it had the previous evening, suggesting the heart was healing from Rookwood's attempted breach. Ron was already up and dressed, an unusual occurrence that spoke to the seriousness with which he was taking their situation. Feeling better, he asked, noticing Harry stirring. Much, Harry confirmed, sitting up and reaching for his glasses. The Nexus has stabilized overnight. I can feel it. Good, because we've got company, Ron said, nodding toward the window. Dumbledore sent a message at dawn. Apparently some experts on the Covenant have arrived to help. Harry dressed quickly, curiosity piqued. Did he say who? Just that we should meet him in his office after breakfast. Ron shrugged. Hermione's already up and researching, by the way. Went to the library at first light, muttering something about interdimensional magical theory. Harry smiled fondly. Some things never changed, even amid world-altering magical crises. Let's get some breakfast, then. I'm starving. They headed down to the Great Hall, where they found Hermione already at the Gryffindor table, surrounded by books while absently nibbling toast. Her face lit up when she spotted them. Harry. How's your connection to the Nexus this morning? Mine feels much stronger. I think the heart is recovering nicely from the disruption. Same here, Harry confirmed, sliding onto the bench beside her. Any luck with your research? Some, she said, pushing a particularly ancient tome toward him. I found references to previous convergences and how guardians managed them. It seems we need to establish a harmonizing resonance across multiple nexus points simultaneously to correct the accelerated alignment. In English? Ron requested, helping himself to eggs and sausage. We need to visit other nexus points in person, Hermione translated, and use our guardian connection to cleanse them of corruption, then link them back into the proper network pattern. So a world tour of magical hotspots, Harry summarized. While also attending classes and keeping Voldemort from taking over Britain. No one said being a guardian would be easy, Hermione replied with a small smile. But Dumbledore's message mentioned help arriving. Perhaps they'll have solutions we haven't considered. The enchanted ceiling above showed a calm blue sky with scattered clouds, a marked improvement from the reality-bending display of the previous day. Throughout the hall, students seemed more relaxed, the strange phenomena having largely subsided overnight. After finishing breakfast, they made their way to Dumbledore's office, giving the password, acid pops, still worked, and ascending the spiral staircase. Harry knocked on the heavy wooden door, which swung open immediately at his touch. Ah, right on time, Dumbledore greeted them from behind his desk. Please, come in. We have much to discuss. As they entered, Harry noticed two unfamiliar figures seated in comfortable armchairs before Dumbledore's desk. Both appeared elderly but carried themselves with a vitality that belied their apparent age. The man had a neatly trimmed white beard and keen eyes that studied Harry with immediate interest. The woman beside him had silver hair arranged in an elegant knot, her expression both wise and warmly amused. May I introduce, Dumbledore said with evident pleasure, Nicholas and Perenelle Flammel, former guardians of the Covenant and the last active pair before the severance in 1945. Harry, Ron, and Hermione stared in undisguised amazement. The creators of the Philosopher's Stone, over 600 years old, and former guardians of the Covenant, it was almost too much to process at once. Mr. Potter, Miss Granger, Nicholas Flamel acknowledged, rising to shake their hands. His grip was firm, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. The new guardians of Hogwarts. We've been most eager to meet you. Indeed, Perenelle added, her voice carrying a slight French accent despite centuries in Britain. When Albus informed us of the Covenant's reawakening and the current crisis, we knew we must offer our assistance. But, Hermione began, then caught herself. Forgive me, but I thought, after the Philosopher's Stone was destroyed. Nicholas chuckled, exchanging an amused glance with his wife. That we would be dead. A reasonable assumption, my dear, but not quite accurate. We had enough elixir reserved to set our affairs in order, yes, but also to sustain us for a specific purpose, precisely this situation. We've been waiting for the Covenant to choose new guardians, Perenelle explained. Our final obligation was to pass on our knowledge and experience when the time came. Which it now has, Dumbledore concluded, gesturing for everyone to take seats. Nicholas and Perenelle have spent centuries studying the Covenant. Their expertise will be invaluable in addressing the current convergence crisis. Harry felt a surge of relief and hope. Having experienced guardians to guide them changed the situation dramatically. You were active during the last convergence attempt, he said. In 1945, with Grindelwald. Nicholas's expression darkened slightly. Indeed we were. Gellert Grindelwald was perhaps the most dangerous Watcher leader in centuries, brilliant, charismatic, and utterly convinced of his righteous purpose to reshape reality, for the greater good. Much like the current situation, Perenelle added, he corrupted multiple Nexus points in preparation for the natural convergence. But his approach was more direct than Rookwood's, a frontal assault rather than subtle manipulation. Which ultimately failed, Dumbledore noted, a shadow crossing his features at the mention of his former friend. At great cost, Nicholas confirmed grimly. The German Nexus was completely destroyed in the confrontation, creating a permanent weak point in the boundary network that has never fully healed. Is that why this convergence is happening ahead of schedule? Hermione asked. Because of the damage from 1945? Precisely, Miss Granger, Perenelle said approvingly. The 30-year natural cycle has been compromised by both that historical damage and the Watcher's current interference. What should have occurred in 2011 has been accelerated to the present. So how do we fix it? Harry asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. Rookwood is contained, but the other Nexus points remain corrupted, and the boundaries are still weakening. Nicholas and Perenelle exchanged glances, communicating silently in the way Harry had noticed he and Hermione doing since their guardian bond formed. There are two approaches, Nicholas finally said. The ideal solution would be to visit each corrupted Nexus point in person, using your guardian connection to cleanse and realign them individually. But that would take months, Hermione pointed out, and require extensive international travel. We can't exactly leave school for a world tour. Indeed not, Perenelle agreed. Which brings us to the second approach, establishing a resonance cascade from the Hogwarts Nexus. A properly calibrated pulse of guardian energy, channeled through your anchors, could potentially reach the other Nexus points through the network connection. Like a magical reset, Ron suggested, following the concept surprisingly quickly. Sending a clean signal to override the corruption. An apt analogy, Mr. Weasley, Nicholas approved. However, such an approach carries significant risks. The energy required would place tremendous strain on both the Hogwarts Nexus and on you as guardians. And if the calibration were incorrect, it could accelerate the boundary collapse rather than correcting it, Hermione concluded soberly. Precisely, Perenelle confirmed. This is why we have come, to help you prepare for either approach, though time constraints may force the latter option despite its dangers. Dumbledore, who had been listening quietly, now leaned forward. There is also the matter of your education to consider. While the Covenant crisis is undeniably urgent, your development as wizards remains important, particularly as it strengthens your capacity as guardians. We've discussed this at length, Nicholas added. And propose a compromise. Perenelle and I will remain at Hogwarts, working with you each evening to develop your guardian abilities and prepare for the resonance cascade, should it become necessary. Meanwhile, during winter break, we can attempt direct intervention at the nearest corrupted Nexus point, the one in Western Ireland. This approach balances your educational needs with the urgency of the situation, Perenelle concluded. And allows us time to properly train you in techniques it took us decades to master. Harry looked to Hermione and Ron, gauging their reactions. Both seemed cautiously optimistic about the proposed plan. Having experienced guardians to guide them changed the equation significantly, offering hope where before they'd faced only overwhelming responsibility. That sounds reasonable, Harry agreed. When do we start? Tonight, Nicholas said decisively. In the heart of Hogwarts. We would like to examine the Nexus directly and assess its current condition after Rookwood's interference. There's another matter, Hermione said hesitantly. Yesterday, during the confrontation with Rookwood, he mentioned something about Harry's parents being chosen as guardians before us. He implied they discovered the Watcher's plans for the 1981 convergence, and that's why he arranged for Voldemort to target them. Both Flamel's expressions grew solemn. James and Lily Potter were indeed selected by the Covenant, Perenelle confirmed gently. We had been monitoring potential candidates after the 1945 severance, hoping for the Covenant's reactivation. Your parents demonstrated remarkable magical compatibility and ethical alignment, key traits for guardian pairs. They discovered evidence of Watcher activity while working for the Order of the Phoenix, Nicholas continued. Specifically, they identified Augustus Rookwood as a key Watcher operative within the Ministry, despite his apparent Death Eater connections. Did they create anchors? Harry asked, thinking of the empty pedestals in the heart. Did they bond with the Nexus? Nicholas and Perenelle exchanged another look, clearly weighing how much to reveal. Finally, Nicholas answered, they began the process, yes. They visited the heart on 3 occasions, with Albus's guidance. On their final visit, they initiated communion with the Nexus, though they did not complete the full bonding ritual. Their anchors formed partially, Perenelle added, her voice gentle. But remained incomplete, suspended between manifestation and potential. When they were killed, the partial anchors dissipated, returning to the Nexus itself rather than taking physical form. Harry absorbed this information with mixed emotions. There was pain in knowing how close his parents had come to the same path he now walked, cut short by Voldemort's attack. But there was also a profound sense of connection, a continuation of purpose that linked him to them beyond mere genetics or magical inheritance. So Rookwood manipulated Voldemort, Harry said slowly, using the prophecy to eliminate potential guardians who might interfere with the Watcher's plans for the 1981 convergence. It appears so, Dumbledore confirmed gravely. Though Tom Riddle believed he was acting solely on the prophecy's threat, unaware he was simultaneously advancing the Watcher's agenda. The Watchers and Voldemort remain separate threats, Nicholas emphasized. With different goals and methods. But occasionally, as with your parents, their interests have aligned in tragic ways. And now we're facing both simultaneously, Ron observed pragmatically. Death Eaters and Watchers, just our luck. Indeed, Mr. Weasley, Perenelle said with a hint of a smile. But you also have advantages your opponents do not, including our centuries of experience with the Covenant. The meeting continued for another hour, with the Flammels explaining more about their history as guardians and the specific training they planned to provide. By the time they finished, a clear path forward had emerged: intensive guardian training each evening, continued vigilance against both Watcher and Death Eater threats, and preparation for direct intervention at the Irish Nexus during winter break. One final matter before you go, Dumbledore said as they prepared to leave. In light of these extraordinary circumstances, I have arranged for you to have access to a private study room adjacent to the library. It has been specially warded to prevent eavesdropping and will allow you to conduct research and discussions related to the Covenant without fear of being overheard. That will be tremendously helpful, sir, Hermione said gratefully. Additionally, Dumbledore continued, eyes twinkling, I believe some accommodation regarding homework deadlines may be appropriate, given your rather significant extracurricular responsibilities. Ron perked up noticeably at this, earning an amused glance from Harry and an exasperated one from Hermione. We'll try not to take advantage, Harry promised, though he was privately relieved at the prospect of some academic flexibility. Balancing classes with guardian training would be challenging enough without strict assignment deadlines. Very well then, Dumbledore concluded. Nicholas and Perenelle will meet you at the entrance to the heart after dinner this evening. Until then, I suggest you attend your classes as normal and avoid drawing unnecessary attention to yourselves. As they descended the spiral staircase from Dumbledore's office, Harry felt more optimistic than he had since discovering the Covenant. The situation remained grave: corrupted Nexus points, weakening boundaries, Watchers still active worldwide, but they no longer faced it without guidance. The Flammels' centuries of experience as guardians offered hope that the crisis could be managed, even if the path forward remained challenging. 600 years old, Ron marveled as they walked toward their first class. Imagine what they've seen, what they know. It's extraordinary, Hermione agreed. The magical advancements, the historical events they've witnessed firsthand. I have so many questions for them. Beyond just guardian training, Harry added, understanding her academic excitement. Though that's our priority now. They separated for morning classes, Hermione to ancient runes, Harry and Ron to charms, with plans to meet in their new private study room during the free period before lunch. As Harry settled into his seat in Flitwick's classroom, he felt the Hogwarts Nexus humming contentedly at the edge of his awareness, stronger and more stable than the previous day. The boundaries were holding, for now. Tonight, they would begin proper Guardian training with the Flammels. The convergence crisis remained urgent, but no longer seemed insurmountable. With experienced guidance, strong friends, and their growing Guardian abilities, they had a fighting chance against whatever the Watchers planned next. And somewhere beyond the Veil of Death, Harry liked to think his parents were watching, proud to see their son continuing the Guardian legacy they'd begun, protecting the boundaries between worlds just as they had tried to do before Voldemort cut their lives short. The path ahead would not be easy, but it was clearer now. Guardian of the Covenant of Convergent Paths, a responsibility Harry had never sought but now accepted fully, with Hermione at his side and their friends supporting them. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as they always had. In the heart of Hogwarts, the Nexus pulsed serenely, gold and silver light intertwining around the stag and otter anchors. The Covenant endured, as it had for millennia, maintaining the delicate balance between worlds. And now it had new guardians to champion its ancient purpose, to ensure that the boundaries between realities remained strong yet permeable, allowing magic to flow naturally without the catastrophic blending that would destroy all. The ancient covenant had chosen well. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.